Imagine this. You walk into a room where every chair has already been arranged. The lighting is set, the temperature calibrated, and even the air smells faintly of someone else's choice of perfume. You didn't touch a thing, and yet the environment presses itself on you. In that instant, before you've spoken a word, you feel something primal rising inside you, the urge to rearrange, to assert, to claim even the smallest corner of the space as yours. Maybe you move a chair. Maybe you adjust the blinds. Maybe you simply cross your arms as if creating an invisible boundary. Why? Why does even the smallest act of control feel like reclaiming oxygen? Now picture a different scene. You're at work. A decision is being made by people above you, people whose words you must obey, even if they don't make sense. A strange tension coils in your chest. You might comply outwardly, but inside another voice shouts, "Why should they decide for me? Who gave them the right?" The situation may not threaten your survival, yet it awakens the same heat as if your very existence were being threatened. Strangely, this need to influence, to shape, to control shows up everywhere, from the boardroom to the bedroom, from international wars to petty domestic quarrels. It sneaks into how you speak to your partner, how you scroll through your phone, how you negotiate with your own thoughts late at night. You may not admit it. You may even pride yourself on being easygoing, someone who doesn't need power. But even then, don't you want control over your own peace? Don't you get irritated when someone else interrupts your schedule, your freedom, your silence? Is that not still the craving for control, only turned inward, disguised as independence? Here lies the paradox. Humans claim to desire freedom, but what they truly hunger for is control. Freedom without control is chaos. Control without freedom is tyranny. So we live in the in-between, clinging to both, unable to resolve the contradiction. But ask yourself this: if power is just an illusion, why do we chase it as if it were oxygen? Power takes strange forms. For one person, it's a career title, a polished nameplate on the office door. For another, it's the quiet ability to say no when everyone expects a yes. For parents, it might be the authority to shape the destinies of their children. For lovers, it could be the subtle tug-of-war between closeness and independence. And in society at large, entire governments rise and fall on the single promise: we will give you control over your life. But what is this control? Is it real, or just a comforting illusion? Consider this unsettling thought. You cannot control your heartbeat, your hunger, your inevitable aging. You cannot control the weather, the shifting moods of those around you, or the uncertainty of tomorrow. Yet still, you build your life around rituals, routines, and rules, small fences against the vast wilderness of unpredictability. So maybe the deeper question is this: do humans crave power because it is necessary, or because without it, they would collapse into despair? Look closer at history. Every empire, every civilization, every ideology has been powered by this same hunger. Alexander the Great wept because there were no more worlds left to conquer. Nietzsche warned that the will to power is the core of human existence itself. Even the hermit, hiding in the desert, claims power, not over others but over himself. The ascetic's denial is itself a form of domination. I will not be ruled by desire. I will rule over it. And so, whether through armies or through meditation, through wealth or through withdrawal, humans circle endlessly around the same gravitational center: power. But here's the cruel irony. Those who seem to have the most power often confess to feeling the least in control. The king cannot sleep without fearing betrayal. The billionaire obsesses over markets he cannot tame. The parent who controls a child too tightly ends up watching them rebel more fiercely. It's as though power once gained turns hollow. The hand that seizes it finds nothing solid inside, and yet no one stops reaching for it. So ask yourself, why do you crave control in the first place? Is it survival? Ego? The illusion of order in a chaotic universe? Or something even deeper, an instinct etched into your very psychology, older than language, older than civilization itself? What if the truth is that you were never chasing money, status, or respect at all? What if behind every ambition, every argument, every decision, there was only one hidden hunger, the need to shape reality according to your will? And if that is true, if this need for power is the silent architect of human behavior, then you must face a terrifying possibility. Perhaps everything you think you want is just another mask for control. Hold that thought, because the answer lies deeper, buried in the psychology of the mind, and in the philosophies that have tried again and again to expose the roots of this craving. Think about this. If craving control is so universal, why does it so often leave us restless, anxious, or even broken? You would imagine that once someone secured influence, over money, over people, over circumstances, they would finally feel safe. And yet, the opposite happens. Power only sharpens the hunger. The politician who wins an election immediately fears losing the next. The lover who secures affection grows paranoid about betrayal. The worker who finally climbs the corporate ladder discovers not liberation, but 1,000 new chains of responsibility. It's as though control itself is a mirage. The closer you move toward it, the further it drifts away. But why? The psychological roots. Carl Jung once wrote that every human being is a battleground of competing forces, the conscious self, the unconscious shadow, the collective myths we inherit. To Jung, the desire for control isn't just about the external world. It's a desperate attempt to manage the chaos within. When you demand control over your surroundings, what you're really saying is, I cannot bear to face the wildness inside my own psyche. Think of the perfectionist who arranges every detail of their desk. It looks like order, but underneath is a fear. If I don't impose order here, the disorder inside me will erupt. Or the parent who controls their child's every move, it looks like love, but often it is terror. If I let go, I'll have to face the emptiness of my own life. Nietzsche took it even further. He argued that at the core of all life is the will to power, a primal drive not merely to survive, but to expand, to dominate, to impose form onto chaos. To Nietzsche, power is not just a human obsession, it is the engine of existence itself. Even the tree growing toward the sun, he said, is an act of power, a reaching, a claiming, a pushing outward. This sounds inspiring, but it carries a dark implication. If life itself is defined by power, then to renounce it is to renounce being fully alive. No wonder humans cling so tightly. Arthur Schopenhauer, Nietzsche's predecessor, would disagree. He believed that life's true essence is will, but this will is blind, ceaseless, and cruel. According to Schopenhauer, your craving for control is not noble. It is a form of slavery to the restless will, which drags you endlessly from one desire to the next. You think you are gaining power, but in truth you are being whipped forward by an invisible master. So on one side we have Nietzsche urging us to embrace the will to power as the essence of vitality. On the other, Schopenhauer warning that this will is the root of all suffering. Two perspectives, both uncomfortably true. The philosophical roots. The philosophers of freedom saw control as both gift and curse. Sartre declared that humans are condemned to be free. At first this sounds liberating, who doesn't want freedom? But Sartre meant something terrifying. You cannot escape the responsibility of choice. Every moment you are shaping yourself and your world. Even doing nothing is a choice, and so control becomes a double-edged sword. To crave it is natural, but to actually hold it, to realize you are responsible for the shape of your life, can feel unbearable. That's why many people secretly prefer others to decide for them. The illusion of control without the weight of responsibility feels safer. Aldous Huxley warned of this in Brave New World. He saw that most people don't actually want freedom. They want comfort. They want the illusion of control, neatly packaged by systems, governments, and technologies that promise convenience while quietly shaping every choice. It's easier to live in a pleasant prison than to face the abyss of true autonomy. And then comes Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps. Frankl discovered something extraordinary. Even in a place where he had lost all external control, his freedom, his dignity, his very survival, there remained one domain untouched, the control over his inner response. He called this the last of human freedoms, the ability to choose one's attitude, even in the face of suffering. Here, finally, we glimpse the paradox at the heart of control. You crave it everywhere, but the only place it truly exists is within. The hidden problem. So what is the hidden problem? It is this. Humans misplace their hunger for control. You try to control the uncontrollable, other people's opinions, the shifting economy, the tide of history, the uncertainty of the future. And in that endless battle, you exhaust yourself. You build empires but sleep poorly. You protect your loved ones but suffocate them. You structure your life, but find that structure turning into a cage. The true tragedy is not that humans crave control, but that they keep aiming it outward, where it can never be fully satisfied. Meanwhile, the one place where control is possible, the mind, the response, the inner world, remains neglected. As Frankl proved, even in the most extreme deprivation, this inner domain can never be stolen. Yet most people abandon it, chasing instead the fragile, flickering promise of external dominance. This is why the craving for control so often backfires. It is not the hunger itself that destroys you. It is the blindness to where the hunger belongs. The deepening mystery. But here's the deeper question. What happens when entire societies misplace their hunger for control? What happens when nations fight endless wars for dominance? When corporations manipulate psychology to hook human attention? When individuals numb themselves with technology because the uncontrollable feels unbearable? The personal craving becomes collective, and suddenly the entire human project looks like a struggle not for truth or beauty, but for control. And if that is the hidden engine of history, then you must ask, where does it lead? This leads us into darker territory, because misplaced control doesn't just torment the individual, it quietly reshapes societies, cultures, and generations. To understand the true danger of this craving, we must now confront the unseen consequences, the ways this hidden force manipulates your life in ways you never even notice. Picture this. You wake up, reach for your phone, and scroll. Almost instantly, you're inside a world designed not by you, but for you. Algorithms decide which headlines you'll read, which faces will appear, which emotions will be stirred before you've even taken your first sip of coffee. Do you feel it? The silent hand guiding your attention. This is the first unseen consequence of the human craving for control. When you cannot fully control yourself, someone else will gladly do it for you. The personal level. When control becomes a trap. On the surface, control feels like a path to security. You make schedules, you set boundaries, you plan ahead. But beneath this surface lies an insidious trap. The more you attempt to control, the more fragile you become. Consider the person with rigid routines. Their structure gives them comfort, yes, but what happens the moment reality disrupts the plan? A missed train, a cancelled meeting, a sudden illness. For many, this isn't just inconvenience, it feels like collapse. Why? Because control has become identity. When the plan breaks, the self breaks. Psychologists call this the illusion of control, the tendency to overestimate your ability to shape outcomes in an unpredictable world. The gambler believes his lucky number will shift the odds. The anxious lover believes constant texting will prevent betrayal. The overbearing manager believes micromanagement guarantees success. In each case, the illusion soothes for a moment, but corrodes over time. And here's the cruel irony. The tighter you grip, the more life slips through your fingers. The partner suffocates, the team resents, the luck turns sour. Your craving for control doesn't bring stability, it manufactures chaos. The cognitive level, the mind as a prisoner. Now let's go deeper into the architecture of your brain. Neuroscience shows that humans are wired with a negativity bias. We pay more attention to threats than to neutral or positive experiences. Why? Because evolution prioritized survival, not serenity. This bias feeds the craving for control. Your brain constantly scans for danger. social rejection, financial loss, physical harm, and insists, do something, control this, fix it. But because much of life is uncontrollable, the brain often invents illusions just to quiet the alarm bells. Cognitive biases emerge from this desperation. Confirmation bias makes you cling to information that reassures you're in control. Projection bias convinces you that others think and feel as you do. Because unpredictability is unbearable, even superstition arises as a primitive attempt to conjure order where none exists. So while you believe you're making rational decisions, often you're just protecting your mind from the terror of uncertainty. Your craving for control hijacks your perception. Reality bends not toward truth but toward comfort, and the most dangerous part, you rarely notice it happening. The social level. Control as a silent war. Expand this to relationships. Every argument you've ever had is, at its core, a battle of control. Who defines the rules of the relationship? Who sets the pace of intimacy? Who gets the final word? Sometimes this struggle is loud, yelling, manipulation, power games. Other times it's quiet. Withdrawal, silence, passive resistance. Even love, the purest of human bonds, becomes corrupted by this hidden hunger. I love you subtly transforms into, I want you to stay the way I need you to be. The more we fear losing someone, the more we attempt to control them, and the more likely we are to lose them. Friendships fracture, marriages strain, families collapse. Not always because of lack of affection, but because of the unseen poison, control disguised as care. The cultural level. Societies built on control. Now stretch this pattern across entire civilizations. Governments are born from fear of chaos. They promise control, laws, armies, borders. And for a while it works, until the thirst grows insatiable. What begins as protection turns into surveillance. What begins as leadership turns into tyranny. History is littered with examples. Empires rising on promises of order, then collapsing under the weight of their own iron grip. Rome, Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, each consumed by its own attempt to master unpredictability. But the same pattern echoes today. Look around. Mass data collection, algorithmic manipulation, global markets shifting with invisible levers. Entire populations are soothed with convenience while quietly being controlled. The old tyrants ruled with whips and armies. The new tyrants rule with screens and dopamine. Aldous Huxley was right. People don't need to be forced into submission. They'll trade freedom for comfort if the illusion of control is sweet enough. The existential level, losing the self. But perhaps the deepest consequence is not social or political. It is existential. When your life becomes a relentless quest to control what cannot be controlled, you forget the only thing that ever mattered, the ability to live. Think about how much of your energy is spent on this silent war, managing impressions, avoiding embarrassment, rehearsing futures that never arrive, replaying pasts that cannot be undone. The hunger for control devours the present moment. You don't live. You strategize living. You don't experience. You anticipate, manipulate, rehearse. And then, one day you realize decades have passed in this illusion. You never had control, only the performance of it. Jean-Paul Sartre warned of this when he wrote about bad faith, the act of living as though you are not free, as though your choices were dictated by forces outside yourself. It is easier to say, I had no choice, than to face the terrifying truth. You always did. So you build prisons of your own making, mistaking them for safety. And the worst part? You lock the door from the inside. The growing urgency. Now, ask yourself, what is the cost of this unseen trap? The cost is that you stop being fully human. You reduce yourself to a strategist of survival. You think you are exercising power, but really you are being exercised by it. And when billions of humans repeat this pattern, the result is not just personal suffering, it is the shaping of history itself. Wars, tyrannies, addictions, technological enslavement, all of them rooted in the same misdirected hunger. The tragedy is not that control is impossible. The tragedy is that we spend our lives chasing it in all the wrong places. Imagine this. You've been clutching a rope your entire life. The rope is frayed, cutting into your palms, but you refuse to let go. Why? Because you believe the rope is the only thing keeping you from falling into the abyss. Then suddenly, someone whispers, "What if the abyss isn't as deep as you think? What if you could let go and find solid ground beneath your feet?" That's what rebellion against the illusion of control feels like. It's terrifying, counterintuitive, and yet utterly liberating. Because here is the radical truth. Real power begins the moment you stop trying to control what cannot be controlled. Step 1. Recognize the illusion. The first act of rebellion is not action, it is recognition. You must see the bars of the prison before you can step outside it. Think of how often you try to engineer outcomes that are simply beyond you. You rehearse conversations in your head, thinking you can predict how someone else will respond. You plan your future down to the finest detail, as though life won't throw its inevitable surprises. You obsess over your reputation, convinced you can script how others see you. Each of these is an illusion. The rebellion begins when you ask yourself, is this truly within my power, or is this a performance of control? The Stoics knew this secret well. Epictetus taught that the only division that matters is between what is up to us and what is not up to us. Everything else, fortune, health, wealth, the opinions of others, belongs to the latter category. The mistake is not in desiring control, but in misplacing it. Step 2. Redirect the hunger. But rebellion is not simply letting go, it is redirection. Nietzsche spoke of the will to power as life's fundamental drive. You cannot kill this hunger. It is stitched into the fabric of existence, but you can redirect it. Instead of wasting energy on controlling the uncontrollable, pour it into the one arena where power is real, your inner life. Take Viktor Frankl again. In the camps, he could not control his captors, his conditions, or his fate. But he discovered an unshakable truth. Between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space lies freedom. That is, where rebellion lives. When you stop chasing control outwardly and reclaim it inwardly, you discover a new kind of power, not dominance, but sovereignty. You are no longer tossed about by every insult, every market crash, every shifting mood of the world. You become the axis around which your own reality turns. Step 3. Break the scripts. Rebellion also means refusing to live by the scripts society hands you. Think about it. Entire industries profit by feeding your craving for control. Diet companies promise control over your body. Productivity apps promise control over your time. Social media offers control over your identity, curating how others perceive you. And politics? It thrives by promising control over the chaos of the world. To break free is to see these scripts for what they are, manipulations of your deepest hunger. Jean-Paul Sartre warned that most people live in bad faith, pretending they are powerless so they don't have to face the responsibility of freedom. The rebellion is the opposite, refusing the lie that you must obey these scripts. You don't have to chase every standard, follow every algorithm, or bow to every trend. You can write your own script. Step 4. Embrace uncertainty. This is the hardest part. True rebellion means embracing the one thing you've spent your whole life resisting: uncertainty. For centuries, Eastern philosophies have whispered this truth. Buddhism teaches the principle of anicca, impermanence. To cling is to suffer. Taoism tells us to flow like water, to yield rather than grasp. These are not calls to weakness. They are calls to the deepest form of power, the power to live without demanding guarantees. Imagine walking into the unknown, not as a victim, but as a sovereign being, choosing not to control the storm, but to move with it. That is rebellion. Step 5. Create, don't conquer. Perhaps the most radical shift is this. Instead of seeking to conquer life, seek to create within it. The artist does not control the chaos of the world. They transform it into beauty. The philosopher does not control uncertainty. They carve meaning from it. Even the act of love, when free of control, becomes not possession, but creation. Two lives shaping something new between them. When you stop trying to dominate existence, you begin to collaborate with it. Your will to power finds its highest form, not in crushing resistance, but in generating possibility. Historical rebels' history gives us luminous examples of this rebellion. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, surrounded by war and betrayal, turned inward to write Meditations, a book not about controlling others, but about mastering the self. Søren Kierkegaard, confronted by despair, chose to see it not as something to suppress, but as a teacher, an opening into deeper faith and selfhood. Mahatma Gandhi, facing the overwhelming might of empire, refused the usual script of violence. Instead, he wielded the inner power of non-violent resistance, a rebellion that reshaped nations. These figures remind us the greatest power is not found in conquest, but in self-mastery, meaning, and creation. The feeling of freedom. And when you taste this rebellion, something extraordinary happens. The anxiety that once gnawed at you begins to dissolve. The constant vigilance softens. You no longer waste energy trying to bend reality into submission. Instead, you find a strange, almost unshakable calm, the calm of someone who knows where true power lies. It is not indifference, it is not resignation, it is freedom. And in that freedom, you are stronger than you ever were when you were clinging, grasping, controlling. But this is not the end, because once you step into this rebellion, once you let go of the illusions and taste real power, a final question emerges. What is the ultimate truth? What is the deepest realization about power, control, and the human condition? The insight that changes everything? That is where we go now, to the ultimate truth. Imagine for a moment that you are standing at the edge of an ocean. Waves crash, the tide pulls, the horizon stretches endlessly beyond your sight. You step forward, scoop water into your hands, and try to hold it. For an instant, you feel the cool weight. But soon, inevitably, it slips through your fingers. That is life. That is power. You cannot hold it. You can only live within it. The ultimate truth about power is this. You never truly had control, and you never truly needed it. The great illusion. Unmasked. For centuries, humans have mistaken power for permanence. Kings built empires of stone, only to watch them crumble. Lovers swore eternal vows, only to drift apart. Entire civilizations promised to shape destiny, only to be erased by time. The hunger for control has always been shadowed by a great forgetting, that everything, every structure, every bond, every breath, is temporary. And so the final realization comes not from gaining control nor from surrendering it, but from seeing through the illusion entirely. You were never in a battle with life. You were always in a dance. The paradox is unsettling. The moment you stop clutching at power, you discover a deeper power, the power of being fully present in the flow of existence. Freedom, beyond control. Consider this. When you try to dominate reality, you live in constant fear, fear of losing what you've gained, fear of the unknown, fear of failure. But when you release the demand for control, fear dissolves. Why? Because there is nothing left to lose. This is what Zen masters mean when they speak of letting go. It is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is radical freedom. The bird does not control the wind. It rides it. The surfer does not control the wave. They move with it. Likewise, you are not meant to dominate life. You are meant to flow within it. True power is not the ability to bend the world into your will. True power is the ability to remain unbroken even when the world does not bend. The shift from domination to meaning. And here lies the final key. The goal of life was never control. It was meaning. Viktor Frankl's insight echoes louder than ever. Humans can endure almost any suffering if they find meaning within it. Control can vanish in an instant, but meaning remains untouchable. The parent cannot control the destiny of their child, but they can create meaning through love. The artist cannot control how their work will be received, but they can create meaning in the act of creation itself. The individual cannot control death, but they can shape the meaning of their life before it comes. This is the final rebellion, realizing that meaning, not control, was the hidden hunger all along. Power was only ever a mask for the deeper desire, to matter, to live with significance, to leave a mark not of domination, but of authenticity. The existential realization. Think of the philosophers who reached this threshold. Sartre saw that humans are condemned to be free, that even when stripped of everything, you remain responsible for how you define yourself. That responsibility is terrifying, but it is also the highest form of power. Nietzsche declared, "Become who you are." Not who others control you to be, not who fear dictates you to be, but who you truly are when you embrace the fullness of existence without excuses. Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering, and liberation comes not from conquest, but from awakening. Frankl, in the camps, discovered that the deepest human freedom is the ability to choose one's meaning, even in the face of despair. All of them, in their own ways, pointed to the same horizon. That control is a shadow, but freedom of spirit is real. What this means for you. So ask yourself now, what are you still trying to control? The opinions of others, the future that refuses to arrive, the past that refuses to die. Every ounce of energy spent on these illusions is energy stolen from meaning, from presence, from creation. What if you stopped clutching the rope? What if you let the water slip through your hands without despair? What if you chose, instead, to live as though meaning, not control, were your true anchor? You would find that the need to manipulate, to grasp, to dominate, begins to fade. In its place arises something far stronger: clarity, peace, and a quiet, immovable strength. Picture it again, standing at the ocean's edge, waves crashing, horizon endless. This time you do not try to hold the water. You let it flow around you, through you. You laugh because you finally understand. Life was never meant to be possessed. It was meant to be lived. In that moment you are not powerless, you are powerful beyond measure, not because you can bend the waves, but because you no longer need to. The psychology of power is not a story of conquest. It is a story of awakening. The human craving for control is real, but it is misplaced. You do not need to master the world. You need to master the way you meet it. The ultimate truth is this: real power is not control. It is alignment, not domination, but meaning, not conquest, but presence. When you see this, your life changes. Fear loosens, anxiety softens. You stop strategizing existence and start inhabiting it. You stop surviving and start living. And perhaps, for the first time, you understand. The hunger that once enslaved you was not a curse, but a clue. It was pointing you here, to this realization, to this liberation. You do not need to control the ocean. You only need to learn how to swim.